The Tim Heal Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Hill Podcast and Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. I've got a great guest for you. This one you're going to love. So before we get going too far, I'll introduce him. So David, boom, you're in the room. So David, can you tell me when and where you were born? And if you can describe to me what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. So it's all
Yes,
over
so
to you.
yes, so uh 2000, August 27th, 2000. So it was a nice 2000s baby. I grew up in California, small town. It was called Vallejo, California. And basically there it was more of, I don't know how you describe it in England, but out here in California we call it the hood. Basically, it's where things are kind of like shanties out here. It's like a shanty town. The houses aren't super nice. It was a more of a poor area. One of the stores we had normal stores. So out here we have like Safeways for markets, and we have different different small liquor stores. There's like a liquor store on every corner. That's the one thing that you always notice about poor towns. The other thing that you'll also get is the schools were a lot smaller. They're not as high end as some of the other schools in the area. It was just a more of a poor, low end type area. So the stores were very normal. You didn't have anything special about the area. Growing up, it was a privilege just to have such a big family. I grew up in one of 18. I was the second youngest, and we had the same mom and dad. We grew up in a very poor family with we grew up in a cult like religion. To me, it was a cult like religion as I grew up and started to understand it. As we started to grow up in this cult, we had a lot of issues just learning and being a part of the outside world. So we had to inherit each other. We had to basically come together and bond with each other because we didn't really have anyone outside of this religion, because this religion taught us that everyone outside of the religion was going to be going to hell. So we needed to stick together. And that was something we were forced into as young children. And unfortunately, it wasn't the greatest, but at the same time, if you look at the good part about it, we were able to be more outward. And as I started to get into the outside world, I was more of an uh, extroverted type person. I was able to talk and speak and be out there with people. And I think that's one thing that people love about my personality is I don't hold in. I'm able to communicate, talk, and express who I am and be a part of life. And I think I really bond with people in that way. One of the key things about growing up in a big family is that you don't get to stay secluded. There's no isolation in a family. You don't get any personal time. It's just you and them together. If you're quiet, why are you quiet? They always get you out of your shell. And for that, I'm thankful because it taught me to not stay isolated, and being isolated is not good for you. But we always had each other. We always were able to lean on each other. We always were able to play games and have fun. That was one thing that I always remember about my childhood, is that we were able to create things and create fun games out of nothing, such as going to play kickball in the backyard with a ball, and we would create bases out of different materials, or playing swap ball. Swap ball is a basically you use a kickball, a rubber ball, and a bigger one, and a bat, or you can use anything as a bat, like a we always used a vacuum cleaner extension. We'd use that as a bat. We play all these different types of games. We play baseball inside the house and make paper baseballs and roll it up with tape. These different things were so imaginary to us that we would just create little things, building cities out of Lincoln Logs and Legos. And these were the things that I realized as I grew up that were so important, because they taught us to be imaginative, to create things with what we have, to be able to live a life outside of the environment that we had. And sometimes it didn't feel like we were ever, I didn't realize that we were poor until I grew up and I was about 12, 13 years old. But during that time when I was younger, I never really realized that I was actually poor because I was living a life that was just truly amazing in my own imagination. And we were able to live this life with not only myself, but with my brothers and my sisters. And we had such a good time and such a good bond. And as we grew up, these things always linger with me and they always stick with me. So it was such a good time to be alive for me in such a big family. And there's so many pluses to being in a big family that outweighed all the bad things, because it's in every type of family you're always going to have those things that aren't always perfect. But I always try to remember the good times, and those are what truly stuck with me.
Brilliant. Sounds like an awful lot of fun to me. So, the 18, and you was number 16, I guess, or 17.
Yes, number
You're number
17. Yes,
17. So
yes,
you're right at the bottom of the pile. So,
yes.
I mean, did the older brothers and sisters pick on you a lot? Um, or, or,
Oh yeah.
or was it number 18 that copped most of it?
No, so number 18 definitely got the most attention. So being number 17, I realized that I didn't get as much attention. Like, you learn, so the youngest one always gets the most attention. I believe. That's what I found. That's what I figured out. But being number 17, you don't really get as much attention. So you see all the attention from the sisters and the brothers going to the younger one, and it's like, oh, like, I want that. But it's at the same thing, you get all the bullying. It's like, not the second to the youngest, I'm gonna mess with this one. And then the youngest one, we're giving him all the love. So it was cool. It made me a tougher being, I think. But still, it was still fun being the second youngest. You see all the ones ahead of you go out of the house first, and that was, I think, that out of all the things was probably the hardest thing. Is as you start to see the different family members leaving home, you start to feel like, oh man, like we're not always going to be together type thing. And that's how it was. We did everything together. We always played games together. We always experienced different things, at like whether it was ice skating, whether it was going camping, whether it was playing basketball. And then as we grow up, we start to notice these things start to deteriorate. And the relationship, we start to build relationships with ourselves and start building relationships with newer people. So that was the key aspect about being in a big family. Is it doesn't always, that bond that you have when you're younger, it doesn't always last forever, but it
Hmm.
teaches you to cherish it forever though too.
So, I mean, I guess like bedtime was a bit like the Waltons. Night, John Boy,
Oh
night,
my
night,
goodness.
night, night. So it's just echoes of night round the hole.
Yeah, so the bedtime was the craziest. So how we usually did it, every Saturday night, because we were a religious family, my parents would have a Bible study, and we would literally have, so we had pretty big couches in the household, and we had usually had all about, I think the most we've had in the room at once was about 15 of us. So we had all 15 of us, and we're all listening to this Bible story. And then we all, of course, start playing around as soon as the Bible story is over. And then somebody ends up getting hurt and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, here we go. That's how it was. We roughhoused all the time. That was our love communication. But yeah, it was, bedtime was crazy all the time. It's like, okay, even when my mom was trying to communicate with us, like, she'd be like, Jaden, go put your clothes on for bed. Okay, David. Not, and she would just confuse the names. She would point at David but say Jaden, and it's like, oh my goodness. And then you got this one running up the stairs. You got this one jumping off the stairs, and it's like a whole circus. But it was so fun. It's like it goes from chaotic to going totally peaceful at night. I think that's the time my parents enjoyed.
Yeah. So that's when they produce more of you, I guess.
Yeah.
When it all goes quiet.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Exactly.
So, So I mean, you could almost have a full football team. So
Yes, yeah. We had basketball teams. We still have basketball teams where it's just five of us boys.
so we with so many kids, did you bond with a particular brother or sister? Do you have a special affinity with one, or you just it just everybody's just kind of the same?
There's definitely different bonds in the family. I think because of the religion that we grew up in, a lot of them had a lot of mental anguish from it, I guess would be a good term for it. They had a lot of like stuck inside of them that they didn't like. We didn't have like a very close bond to our parents. It was more so a close bond with each other, which I mean, it's 18 of us and two of them.
Yeah.
So I think one of the key things with them too, though, is that my dad, especially, he had a very, very close relationship to that church, and it was more so the church over us, you know. And I think that really drew us away from him and just that him and my mom at the same time is that we weren't as close to them, and we got sent off to different parts of that church and that religion so that other people could watch certain ones of us. So we definitely grew closer to certain ones than others. Like for me, the brother right above me is probably the one I'm closest to. My second oldest brother is also one that I was very close to for a short while and still am. And these are the ones that I really built a bond with. These we talk all the time. I think it's just that we know each other so much. We've been through so much with each other, and we've seen so much that each other has gone through that we really understand and know each other and are able to work with each other. We know how each other reacts. We know how each other gets in certain situations, and I think it builds that core bond. Whereas other ones, we kind of had a dispute or didn't work out so well. We had some unexpected life event that happened between the two of us, and it just we grew apart. And I think that happened to a lot of the family members. So there definitely are some family members that don't really hang out with the family anymore. There are a few that actually do not choose to not hang out with the family or be any part of the family. And then there are some that are very close and very bonded together.
I mean, are you still part of that church, or have you pulled away from that? Because quite
Yeah,
often,
I
people in that sort of brought up in that situation, they turn their back on it when they can, and they walk away.
yeah, immediately. Yes. So I left home when I was 16. I realized that I didn't want that life when I was about 14. I started to get old, and I started to realize as I started to tell people my story, like this isn't normal. That what I'm going through in this religion and what I'm going through in this church is not normal. And then people are like, you that's your life? And I'm like, yeah, that's my life. I mean, we had no TV. We lived off government financials because the church that we went to taught that you couldn't really make money, that money is the root of all evil, and that it creates turmoil between the family. And we had to grow up with that, and it was horrible. I hated it because as I started to grow up, there were things in my family. We were very athletic. That's why I'm a coach now. I teach fitness, nutrition, and mindset because it taught me so much about my life, and it has brought me to where I am today. But even being young, we were all my entire family was very athletic. We played sports all the time, but because of the religion we were in, we could not play organized sports because it was against the ethics of the church. So as soon as I could, I got out. And I was 14 when I realized that I did not agree with what was going on. And it was more so you couldn't, the women had a, basically, the women had a lower role than the man. And basically, that women couldn't speak. It was very, very cultish. Women could not speak in the church. Men had to speak only. That you could not make money, you could not have a really good job, you couldn't go to college to learn because it builds you, or it takes you away from God, and it takes you away from the church. You could not really do anything. You couldn't listen to music, TV. You could not have television, which a lot of these principles are not bad, but
No,
a lot
I
of
mean
it
that's.
was
I
like,
think that's a positive result, not having a TV.
yes. So that's one thing that I really agreed with, because as I was when I was young, of course, I'm very naive, and I was like, man, like everyone else has a TV, why can't we have a TV? You know, and as I started to see that in the world, but then as I grew up, I start to notice the essence of me not needing a TV. Like, I don't need to be watching TV. There's so many great things that I could be working towards. But we
Mm,
were also taught the essence, and this is one thing that I would give my dad, is we were taught the essence of what working and what working towards something will actually give you. And I remember that my dad always did teach us that instead of going to play video games, or instead of going to watch TV, or instead of going to have fun, why not work towards something big? And I remember he always told us, you go through pain before pleasure, and it's like, do the work before you can enjoy the play, you know. So
mm,
that was there were very key essential things that my dad did teach us, and I always try to focus on the good and be grateful for the certain things that did happen in my life, instead of focusing on that negative,
yeah.
because I realized as growing up, you constantly want to linger on, this happened to me, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and that's why I am the way I am. But if you constantly think like that, you're going to be rooted and grounded in, this is the way I am and I can't change. You know, so it slowly turned from, this is who I am and I have to stay this way because this is who I was raised as, to, no, this is what I'm grateful for. I'm thankful for this, and this is who I can become. The sky's the limit, and I had to break certain limiting thoughts. But
Mm.
at the
So,
same
so
time, yeah,
let's just take a couple of steps back. Let's look at
yeah,
what your school was like. Were you
yeah.
homeschooled, or did you go to the church every day for schooling? Where did you go
So
for schooling?
it was on and off with homeschool and public school. So the church itself did not have school, which they actually taught not to send us to school. But of course, not a lot of people can get into homeschool. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and especially with being with 18 brothers and sisters, it would be hard for my mom to teach all of us in different grades. So
Yeah.
they chose to send us to public school. We Most of us got sent to public school. I went to homeschool later on, when I started going to homeschool when I was in eighth grade, was the first time I went to homeschool. I went again when I was in high school, and most of us had, I don't think anyone else in my family, maybe one or two others, went to homeschool, but we stayed in public school, even though
Mm.
it was kind of against what that church taught.
Yeah. I mean, did that cause friction at all between your
So
brothers and sisters? Did it cause friction when you went to church? I guess that you spend most of Saturday and Sunday at church.
yes. So yeah, the church was 3 days a week. So it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Sunday. You had to go, and you had to go. Like, it wasn't an option. Like, you had to go. So Sunday it was all day. So the first class was 10 a.m. and then it ended all the way at 5 at night. So there, of course, there were breaks in between. And then Tuesdays and Wednesdays it was an hour long class at night, and sometimes we'd be there 2 3 hours. Um, yeah, it was you. There was no getting out of it. You had to go, and it didn't really cause friction to send the kids to public school. But I think that's where we realized that what we were being taught and what was being instilled in us wasn't right. Like, we started to
Mm.
notice, like, this isn't a normal thing to be in. But as we can look at it that way, we can also say that we were very disciplined kids at a young age. Like, we were very mature and very disciplined for our ages. But at the same time, I think going into the real world and trying to earn money and make a living and find our purpose in life, that's I think where we struggled, because we were always taught, follow God and you'll be saved, and that just wasn't it, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes he's not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
let's move on a little bit. Let's have a look at what happened when you got to the leaving school age.
Yeah, so
Did you have a high school? Did you have a high school prom, or was that definitely frowned upon? Or
yeah,
because
so when I
you got
was
sort of 17 or 16 other brothers and sisters that have gone before you, like, so have they
yeah,
been
no,
able to set a pattern for you?
we were, I mean, a lot of us were very rebellious. So, I mean, we definitely went to prom, definitely. Um, a lot of us went to prom, but like I said, I left at 16 and I moved to Vegas on my own with one of my sisters. So I lived far away from my parents at that time in that religion. And being at that age, I chose to, at that point, I was in a very hard point in my life. I started smoking weed and drinking at a very young age. It was just something that I chose to do because my parents were going through a separation. We were going through a hard time moving from house to house. And it got very hard for me. And I chose vices was my first thing because I didn't really have anyone mentoring me or helping me. And at that time, all the family had like separated and moved away on their own. So I had chose to go. I wanted to graduate school, and my key thing with that was if I could just get away from that and just focus on school, I'd be able to finish school. And so my thing was I'd do my schooling, come home, smoke weed, so I didn't have to pay attention to any of that stuff, and then just go back and do it again. And for some reason that worked. But I didn't stay on that. When I was tired of doing it, I knew that wanted to be a very I wanted to be have a better life, and I wanted to live a great life. And to do that, I would have to get rid of these vices. So I had moved to Vegas when I was 17, and I lived with my sister, and she had told me that I can graduate from high school and they would do whatever they could to help me to do that. So I gave up smoking, I gave up drinking, and for the last 2 years of my high school, I just focused on finishing school to the best of my ability, and that's where I found weightlifting. I got into weightlifting and nutrition, and that just totally changed my life. And it kind of, I went to prom. That was a whole nother story because my prom date actually didn't end up going with me. So I ended up not going to prom because of that. But it was all in all, like it was a good experience just getting away, learning on my own, going through the struggles of finding out who I am and what my purpose is. And fitness and nutrition and mindset became a big part of my life and who I am today. And it's what I teach now.
Okay, so once you finished high school, then you graduated. You missed out on the prom because the bird you picked to go mugged you off and went with somebody else, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, what did you do after school once you graduated?
So when I graduated high school, that was probably the scariest part of my life. I had no mentors, and I didn't have anyone really to guide me. And my sister, the one that I lived with, she did not graduate high school herself, but she was doing really well for herself. She was a Starbucks district manager at the time, and her husband owned his own construction company. So they were doing really well. And their biggest thing with me is they wanted me to become either a lawyer or a doctor because I had changed from I failed my ninth grade to being a straight A student in my senior year for the next 3 years. And I did so well that they wanted me to go to college to be a lawyer or a doctor. But deep down, that's not what I wanted to do. I was like, there's nothing that I find interesting about that. And the one thing that always got me was art and fitness. I loved those two things. I could draw and just get lost in that flow state. And I wanted to do something with art, but I was so scared because I started seeing all these different kids saying, "Oh, I'm going to this college and I'm going to this university and I'm going to this college." And I'm like, "Man, I don't know what I'm doing. Honestly, I haven't even thought about it." And it was such a scary moment for me because it's like these kids have their parents helping them out, and it's like I had no one. And that was one of the scariest parts for me because I was like, you know what? I'm just going to join the military. Like I'm one of the, I had did some amazing things in my fitness journey that I surprised myself, and I wanted to be a part of one of an elite group. And the Marine Corps was the only elite group that I could think of that I could join. So after high school, I was set on just, okay, this is my plan. I'm going to join the military. But I had a sister that came out to visit, and she had told me, why not try community college to figure out what I wanted to do? So after I finally agreed to her suggestion, I went to college, community college in LA. I moved to LA. And after that, I literally went to school to learn what I wanted to be. What did I want to be? And I went there and I started to study architecture. And as I started to study architecture, I started to fall in love more and more with art, but I also started to fall in love with um, its humanities, the humanities of just the world and also of the US. And that was one of the studies that I found intriguing in school that really caught my attention. And I wanted to make that a part of my journey. So I figured out, there got to a point where I was like, man, like this school thing is not like, I'm not learning anything. I'm not getting anywhere. This isn't what I really want to do. And I felt so stuck and depressed at one point. I was just going to the gym to work out. I was just going to school. And then going to, I was just going home, and that was it. It was just home, work, and school. And I had like nothing going on. I had no family. I had no friends. I was just concentrated on going somewhere in life.
Mm.
And I was like, you know what? I want something bigger. I want to challenge, something to really boost me, to get me the courage and the grit to go where I want to be in life. So I finally pulled the button and chose to go with the Marine Corps. I joined the Marine Corps in 2020 and went in 2021, and that's where everything started. I My whole life changed after that. It was a life-changing experience, and
Mm.
I now recommend to anyone like getting out of high school that has no idea what they want to do in life is to go join the military for 2 to 4 years, because it'll give you such a good realization and such a good grip on understanding what you want to be, how to actually achieve it, and then have structure in your life to achieve it. So that's kind of where it all started.
So I guess you went into the Marine Corps during lockdown.
Yes, it was right
How
in
did
COVID.
that affect your training, where you couldn't have
Oh
any
man.
contact with people, or did they just mug that off?
No. They were very serious about it. And it actually ended up me spending more time in training. So the usual training cycle will take about 6 months. We ended up staying in there for almost a year in training. So twice the amount of time, because we had to go through different COVID systems or whatever they called it. But basically, you go into training, and before you could even start your basic training, you have to spend 2 weeks in isolation to even get started. So we stayed in isolation for 2 weeks. Then we went into boot camp. And the crazy thing is that in the military, when you're in boot camp, you're not the cleanest, and you're not at all like, everyone's filthy.
Yeah.
And but that was the crazy thing, is they said, like with COVID and stuff, you had to wash your hands, you had to stay clean and stuff. But in the military, we did none of that, and no one got sick. So it was so wild to me. And then on top of that, we went into training for about it was a 3 month cycle. We went into training, we finally finished, and that was like life changing for me, because you had to go through all the cold, through all the training. We went through the winter, so it was just freezing cold, low
What
crawling through water.
in California?
Yeah,
Where did you
yeah.
do your marine training?
So it's right next to the water in Camp Pendleton. It's called MCRD out in San Diego, California, but it's literally right next to the water. So everything's a little bit colder, but in the winter, we can't, it's the Marine Corps. Like, they're not going to be a sissy on you. They're going to make sure they hold you to the highest standard.
Yeah.
And so there's no gloves. You don't get to wear gloves. You wear your uniform. There's no wearing raincoats. There's no wearing beanies. Like, wear what you need to wear, the basic minimums. You don't need all that other stuff. So sometimes you'd wake up and you don't feel your fingers, and you don't feel your toes, but hey, let's go, you have it. And that was the other thing, is going through such a frantic time of my life. It really taught me to bond with other people and draw close to other people. And I think that was very special because I met so many people. There were people from all over the United States that came to this spot, and I was able to meet so many cool people and make such great relationships. But even in the Marine Corps, I knew that I wanted to be something big. And right out the gate, I chose to be a leader, and I was the leader in my platoon for boot camp, and I chose to continue doing that. And I knew that I had greatness within me, and I knew I had that in me to be better and be something bigger. So my whole Marine Corps career was, I want to be something bigger, something more challenging. I don't want to stay a basic Marine. So I went through all my training like that. And then after boot camp, we got thrown into another 2 weeks of quarantine. And then we went into our next session of training. And then after that training, we went through another 2 weeks of quarantine. And it's like every different section of training we went to, we had to go through quarantine. And it was like, this is so crazy, man. And it just kept us so far like away from everyone. And we didn't get to see, like, I didn't see my whole family. I didn't even get to talk to them for the first 5 months. It was 5 months until I got my first phone call with them. So that was the biggest thing about it, is that I didn't get to talk to family or anything. And I think that drew me closer to me. And I think that really brought me to a closer spot with understanding and learning myself and learning to love who I am without having anyone else. But that was the one key thing that I would give the military, is it taught me structure, grit, discipline, not giving into how you feel, because there's going to be times you're feeling freezing cold or the
Yeah.
environment isn't perfect, but you have to do it anyway. And that, I will always be thankful for that training, because without the Marine Corps, I wouldn't be able to do that. And going into what I'm going into now, being an entrepreneur and teaching people about fitness, nutrition, and mindset, I have to make my own living. I have to be able to teach these people. And it's not always going to be easy. It's never going to be the perfect environment. It's never going to be the perfect setting, but it's learning to be able to adapt and overcome and be able to make the best of every situation, no matter what is given to me. And I think that was the one thing that I would always recommend any person that does not know what they want to do to go into the military, to actually learn these traits, because they're essential to
Yeah.
becoming something better in life.
Absolutely. So bring us a bit more up to date. What are you doing nowadays? Are you still involved with the military? Do you still have a reserve liability, or what are you doing?
Yeah, so I left the military early. I was about a year and a half in. I decided, I was in the reserve. I did not like the reserves. I wanted to go active duty. It was a fault of mine. I should have, right out of the gate, the recruiter had told me that it was going to be harder to become an active duty Marine if I became a reserve. So I had chose to go into the reserves, not really understanding what he was talking about. And as I got out of all my training and went into my duty station, I learned that he was right. Like, I hated the reserve life, because you're taking 2 days, maybe a whole weekend out of every month to go to a duty station and do something that's very, very fast paced. And then you got to go back into the civilian life. And it's like, I don't like the civilian life. So you go from being yelled at and having like all this
Yeah.
stuff going on to going to this civilian life. And you have to have a job and be able to provide for yourself at the same time. And you don't have the benefits of an active duty Marine. And being in the reserves, I struggled. I was financially and mentally going under. And every weekend, just being able to do this. And it got to a point where I was going to get a promotion at my job to be able to sustain the lifestyle that I had. And I got called up in the reserves to go work while I was going in for an interview for that promotion. And I ended up having to call off the interview and go because of the negative paperwork. I was actually threatened with the brig too. to actually go in and go serve this time. And I was so like detrimented at that point where I was like, man, I don't like this. And I wanted to go into training. My main purpose about going into the reserves is I wanted to train to become a MARSOC Marine, which is the Special Forces for the Marine Corps, excuse me. And I wanted to become an officer as well. But that seemed impossible just being in the reserves. And I had I was one of the fittest guys in my platoon. I had the highest PT scores in my platoon, and for some reason I was not able to be accommodated for the certain training for MARSOC. So I got to the point where I was over it, but I met a mentor at that time, and he had started training me about the stock market, and I was like, man, like I could make money doing this, and maybe I could just do this and stay in the Marine Corps. Like, and I got so excited that I started making a little bit of money in the stock market, right? And as soon as I started making money, I was like, man, like I can make this a full-time thing. And I decided that if I was going to be able to do something great, that I wasn't going to be doing it with the Marine Corps because I was just being held back every month. I was being pulled back and losing money and losing time, and it was just pulling me away from what I really wanted to do. So I started to not like really participate in the Marine Corps. I would go, of course, because I didn't want to get in trouble. But when I got there, they saw my attitude towards it, and they sooner or later just started pulling me. They started pulling me away from it, and they threw me into their way of getting rid of me in the Marine Corps was they threw me in a mental asylum and threw me in there for 2 weeks. Worst 2 weeks of my life. I hated it, and I went in there for 2 weeks, and then they discharged me for medical discharge, and that was how they got rid of me. And after that, the mentor that I had decided that I didn't have what it took to be in the stock market, and he dropped me at the same time. So it was a very detrimental, hard time in my life because I went through all of that to do that, and then I got dropped from it. And I was like, "Oh, this is horrible." So I had to the where I was living in LA, Los Angeles. I decided to move back home closer to family because I had to. There was no way I was going to be able to support myself, and I moved back home. I lived with the brother, and literally for months, I just thought about my life and how it just went, and I lost everything, and I had to start from square one all over again. I gave up everything to follow a dream, and me giving up that thing to follow what I wanted ended up not breaking through. And it's like I was so mentally incapacitated that I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went through back to a basic life working a 9 to 5 that I hated. And I started going to school to become a finance. I went to school for finance again, and that wasn't it. And then about a year in, I started to want to become an entrepreneur, and I learned about this little gig that you can start in car rentals, so you can start your own car rental company. And I learned how to do it. I learned the basics of it, and it was just basic car sharing. I got a few cars, threw them on the market, and while I was working my 9 to 5, I was making on top of what I was making at Starbucks. So I was a Starbucks manager. I was making about $2,000 a month. I started making about five, six, $7,000 a month on top of that with the car rental. So I was making more money, and I was like, man, this is awesome. And I was going to school, and I was like, man, maybe I could quit my 9 to 5. I didn't like working at Starbucks because it was very degrading. I didn't like the environment. It was not who I was. It didn't bring me out. It didn't make me a better person. It didn't challenge me in any way. And so I decided that was my goal, was to start the car rental company, and I wanted to make enough money that I can leave. But at the time, I had a business partner, and I wanted her to come with me. She was such a big part, a big asset of my company too. And I wanted to be able to support both of us so that way we can help it grow. So I decided I would quit first. She worked with me at Starbucks too. And I decided that I would quit first. So I quit, and I didn't think I was capable of doing it because I was like, man, there was a lot of what ifs. What if this doesn't work? What if I don't make enough money? What if this happens? What if that? And it was like, man, get rid of that. What if I do succeed? What if I do make it, you know? And I started making more and more money, and then sooner or later different things started happening in the car rental company about a few months after I quit my 9 to 5, and I just realized that, oh my goodness, I don't know if this is going to work. And the money started, I started losing money, I started going into debt. And then that was the first challenge, and I that was my first failure in entrepreneurship. And again, it was like I had to start over again, and I had to get another job. And that was like, oh my goodness, like it hit me. I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, this is crazy. But I always remembered in the Marine Corps, we are always taught, like, no matter how hard times get, don't give up. Just one foot in front of the other, and sooner or
Yeah.
later it worked. At the end of the Marine Corps recruit training, you go through something called the Crucible, and it's a 3-day trial. And basically, you only get 6 to 7 hours of sleep in 3 days. You only get three meals during that time, and sometimes you don't even get that much. And then on top of that, you're hiking about 50 to 60 miles in that 3-day period. And we went through that, and I always look back to that. My mental capacity, like I was tired, fatigued, my body was sore, my body hurt, my mind hurt, but every little ounce of me I took from my brain, and I kept going forward every second and just kept everything that I could to keep going. And then after that 3 days, it felt like an eternity. But after that 3 days, we got the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor and became a Marine. And that was worth every second of that trial. So
Mm.
going through entrepreneurship, it's like every failure that you go through, every business
Yeah.
opportunity that doesn't work out, it's working out. You're getting better. Just keep moving forward. And I learned one of the key things that I learned from the Marine Corps, and that I will always keep for myself, is that the people who win are the people that just don't give up. As long as you don't give up, you're going to adapt and overcome.
Yeah. So what are you doing nowadays then? Where did you get to?
Yeah, so I actually, after that entrepreneur with the car sharing didn't work out, I went back to a 9 to 5, but I always had a passion for fitness. I have been working out since I was 16, 17 was when I first started working out. And I
So you're a
had
bit of a
become
gym
so
queen
advanced
then.
with it. Yes. Yeah. So, but I was more so into holistic training, what fitness did for your mentality. And I had so many hard times in my life that when I did have hard times in my life, the first place that I went was to the gym. Uh, and people might think that's very dumb. Like, why do you go to the gym? You just want to look good, things like that. But that's not at all why I did it. There's scientific research that proves that when you go to the gym, your brain chemistry is actually changed, and there's serotonin releases that help your body and your mind change its entire mood and energy and chemical releases. And that was one of the key things that it did for me. Like, I wasn't doing it for the looks, even though the looks came. I was doing it for the mentality. It's what helped me survive for so long and keep doing the very best that I could. And so I trained for so long. I had so much knowledge. I was actually a part-time coach at a CrossFit gym, and I joined when I started coaching. I loved seeing transformations, and I already had started coaching people personally, and I had changed their lives just being able to coach them just with fitness. I didn't even add any nutrition in. It was just working out. And I started to, there were two trainees that I had really changed their life, losing tons of pounds, but not only did they lose a ton of weight, they became a whole different, totally different person. The person that they admired, that they loved to look at, and they became so much better in different aspects of their life.
Mm.
And so I realized that, and I told myself, like, maybe this is what I want. So the crazy thing about that is I had a guy that kept coming up on my social media pages by the name of Wes Watson. And he kept coming up, and all he was about was fitness, nutrition, and mindset, and how it changed his life. And I started to see the different transformations that he had, with different people. And then I started to see him get on some different podcasts that I really listened to. And I was like, man, this guy's legit. So I decided to hire him. I gave up everything. I gave up my 9 to 5, and I saved up enough money to do so. And I paid him money to become my mentor. And that was my changing point. I was like, he first off, he yelled at me. He was like, you have so much potential. Like, what are you doing? Like, started cussing me out. He was like, stop being lazy. You need to follow your hero's journey. And it really just shocked me out of my comfort zone. And it just like, stop being weak. Like, get out there. You have so much potential. You have so much you've done. Like, the world needs you. Become the person. And this is one quote that he gave me that I will always keep. And it's, become the person that you admire inside and out, and then give that person to the world, and you will never lose. Because the person that you admire, if you're being him inside and you're being him outside of you, everyone will see that and they'll admire that and want to be exactly the same, and they'll come to you. And that's exactly what happened. He gave me a blueprint on how to start my own fitness company. And that's what I did. I immediately started my own fitness journey and teaching fitness, nutrition, and mindset. And right away, I had a few people pick up. It started out slow, of course, and it's still picking up. But right away, my first member, my first client, I was able to correlate what he had taught me, and I applied that to her. And she had a whole mental shift, and she lost a few pounds, and then totally changed her life around. And slowly but surely, I keep adding new members, and they keep seeing the effects. And it's like, this is what I'm living for. And now my goal on being on these podcasts and being out there is to give these stories and give my story to the world, to let people understand that it is possible, and to also show them that through programming, nutrition, mindset, and fitness, that you can be able to change any aspect of your life and become the person that you truly want to be. So that's where I'm at now. Is I'm a fitness mindset and fitness, nutrition, and mindset training coach.
Brilliant. So where can people get hold of you? And do you do it for anybody worldwide? Do you do it online? Do you do it in person? How do you go about it?
Yeah, so I only do online because it's more feasible for me, and I'm able to reach a bigger audience. My dream and my vision is to be able to one day have people all across the world being on the same group, being able to work with me and my team. And that's my dream. So you can find me mostly, I market myself on social media just to cut out all the overhead. So Facebook, you can find me, David Massano. Instagram, you can find me, David_Massano, one of 18. And then, of course, I have TikTok, but I'm not so much on TikTok. But if you're on TikTok and no other platform, you can find me at Cogito_Ergo_Sum Fitness, and I'll give you all that information.
Brilliant. And I'll put that in the description.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. So thank you, David. I think that's what a life.
Yeah.
one of 18.
It's been a wild one.
Oh, that's like my worst nightmare, that is.
It was a nightmare and a blessing at the same time.
Terrific. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. What a life. What a life. Amazing. Anyway, so if you want to get in touch with David and take part in his program, all the details will be in the description. So until next time, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
The Tim Heal Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.